Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of There's a Will. We've been doing this since the beginning of the war on a weekly basis. I don't believe we missed a week so far. And this is a very special gathering today because we have four guests. And in the first part, we're going to be talking about air raid etiquette. And that is all of the do's and don'ts when you're under air attack in Kiev, as Patrick has been during most of the attacks on Kiev. He's been living there for some time now, and particularly in May with 19 air attacks. So Patrick Patterson in Kiev, welcome to the show, Patrick. Good to see you.
Good to see you this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And in the studio, we have ARTUR GÓRNIEWSKI, who is a travel consultant and guide going all over Europe, expert on Polish history and culture, and a practical man. He's been involved in a great deal of philanthropic efforts to do with refugees and orphans from the war.
Hello, Will.
You've worked in both Poland and in Ukraine.
That's correct.
On this, yeah. So welcome to the show, Arthur.
Thank you very much.
I might note that Patrick and Arthur are both good friends of mine. But not only. We're joined by two other friends, Anthony McFarlane Gonzales, who looks to be have interrupted some sort of cycling venture, is it, today, Anthony?
Just finishing.
You just finished. Okay. Welcome to the show. It's good to see you, my friend. Okay. And of course, I save the most impressive intellect for last. If you added all of our intellects together, we might approach the huge brain of our Chinese linguist. He's always embarrassed when I say that. OLGIERD UZIEMBŁO, about whom I cannot say enough wonderful things. Thank you, OLGIERD.
Thank you. I really enjoy your sarcasm every time you use it.
That wasn't sarcasm. That was heartfelt. Heartfelt, my friend. Okay, so we're going to start off the first part, as I said, with air raid etiquette, because the story, Patrick and I have been talking every day for the last week. I mean, we talk, at least every week, but every day for the last week, and it has been quite a thing. We've talked in the middle of the night, during the day. We've talked during air raids, texting back and forth, sometimes on the phone. And I can tell you, it's been, for him, a unique, to say the least, experience. And I look forward to you telling us about some of that. Patrick, first of all, and you guys jump in with any questions after we get through the basics of of how one behaves in an air raid. I mean, Tony, you've been in air raids, right? Many times?
Yeah.
Certainly incoming.
Constantly.
Yeah, and both Afghanistan and Iraq, I suppose, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. But I've been close to the cannons and heard them, but not directly at me in war reporting. And certainly I've been amongst the enemy before. But this is a different experience. I have nothing close in my life to what Patrick has gone through, and I don't believe Arthur, you probably heard the bombs in Lviv, but and OLGIERD, I think, is a man of the intellect who observes, and we need that sort of thoughtful cogitation as well. But Patrick, just take us through the beginning of the week and generally what's been happening, and then how you get through an air raid, please.
Yeah, I think just to start out by, yesterday I was trying to run some numbers through my head, and I went back and added up all the drones and missiles that have come in the last 19 attacks. And if you think about the amount of air defense coming up from the Ukrainian side to intercept these projectiles, it's around, my calculation is around 1,100 projectiles flying through the sky in the last 19 attacks. As we all know, or as I know, by watching these, each drone and each missile that comes into the Kiev airspace is not intercepted with the first missile shot up, or the air defense isn't 100% with the first round going out. So there's been over 1,000 projectiles flying through the city of Kiev above 3.5 million people. And every time one of those is intercepted, that rains down on everything that's below. My experience with the air raid sirens has gone from being casual to the siren sounds, and you can look at your phone app and Telegram, and you can kind of find out if there are drones coming from the Chernihiv region. The air raid siren used to sound and say that there was active aviation in the air and over Russia. And now it's kind of shifted and changed. So there's 3 phases in my playbook. So there's the active aviation for planes that are flying to the launch zone. And if that's the case, then I have a 2 to 3 hour window of knowing that there's going to be missiles coming to Kiev. So I can get so much stuff done.
So let's designate Russian planes. If you could say Russian or Ukrainian when you're doing this, so it's clear to everyone, because a lot of people, this will be entirely new stuff.
Sure.
Right. So the Russian plane, when you know the Russian planes are headed or in the air.
To the launch. Yeah. So when the Tu-95s are heading to the launch zone, it's usually about a 2.5 hour window once they make that announcement till missiles are in Kiev. So I can make that decision at that point, depending on where I am. If I want to go to the subway and just get set up ahead of time and try to get some sleep or relax as much as I can, or if I want to choose to go to the basement of my apartment building. Lately, what's been happening is that the air raid siren sounds, and within 3 to 5 minutes, we have incoming. It's both in drones and with rockets. And what's happening is when they launch these ballistic missiles from land, Ukraine's not able to see or identify that they're in Ukrainian airspace until they're already over. And so that gives everyone in Kiev, I'm speaking solely on my experience and where I am, so I'll speak of Kiev. So everyone in Kiev, when the air raid siren goes off, it takes me about 3 minutes to get all my stuff in my flat and get to the bottom floor of my apartment and walk out the exit. And there's been twice in the last 5 attacks that I've had rockets over my head within 3 minutes. So there's not time to make it to the subway or underground shelter. So the playbook changes with each incoming attack. And you just try to run through that playbook as quickly as you can. The other night, walking out of my flat, maybe 3 minutes after the air raid siren sounded, I knew that there were missiles coming, and I'm walking down this little trail to the main avenue that's in front of the apartment. And then I call them white candles. That's just what I've nicknamed them. And then all the white candles from the Ukrainians start going up into the sky, and you can hear the explosions. And I'm literally, I put myself directly under a overpass freeway, so it gives me some protection above me from falling debris. And I follow that overpass corridor to an entrance to like an underground pedestrian walk path that goes across the road. It's not a subway, so if a missile hits the road there directly, I'm not going to be safe. But if something is hit above the road and intercepted and the debris falls, at least I have the roadway to cover my head. So that's that's what it's been like for the last 19 attacks. The the closest attack recently was a drone attack. And as I used to do, I used to look out my window and just watch all this stuff happen in the distance. And I hear the moped, the drone. It sounds like a moped. And I can hear it, and it's getting closer and closer. And then it gets so close to me that I really wish I knew how close it was. It was so intense and so loud that I decided to bail, and I left the balcony and headed towards the corridor on the 9th floor. I'm on the top floor, and an explosion happened that you could feel it. You could feel it in the building. You could see the flash coming through the window, lighting up the inside of your apartment. Decided that I wanted to get to the bottom floor, and so I didn't want to take the elevator. As the stairwell goes down, there's glass windows that go down the whole way with it. So what I was listening for was how loud was the sound of the drone, which told me how close it was. And so when it was really loud, I put myself in front of the elevator. So it gave me the main wall to the building. It gave me another interior wall, and then it gave me the elevator shaft. So I had 3 walls between me and the outside. And when the drone noise faded, I would run down the stairs, and when the drone sound came back and it was close, I would put myself in front of the elevator shaft. When we got to the bottom floor, putting myself in front of the elevator shaft, the Ukrainian missile intercepted the drone directly above my apartment. And that's the first time I've felt a shockwave and felt wind blow through the open windows of the elevator shaft or the stairwell, wind blowing through the openings on the entrance door, and you could feel that wave literally in your body. The flash that came through the windows that lit up the stairwell was as bright as light can get. I could have read a book in the light. And then you could hear all the debris raining down. And so, you get these pieces that look like this. This is from a rocket.
That's a piece of a rocket right there.
Correct.
Is it one of theirs or one of ours?
This is ours.
Yeah, that's the Patriot.
I'm not sure if it's the Patriot, but they come in all different.
What did they?
Come in all different.
Go ahead.
So they come in all different shapes and sizes. The debris. So we had windows blown out in this neighborhood. The apartment next to the apartment around the corner next to me was the roof was on fire from debris landing on it. Windows busted out. Tree branches were ripped down from. This is how strong these metal pieces are when they're coming down and they hit a tree branch. They're cutting tree branches. They're ripping bark off trees. And the debris field is wide. So in one direction, maybe a quarter of a mile, there was drone debris. And then the opposite direction, you had missile debris. And I saw both. I'm walking over both, going to the shelter. Because I did go to the underground shelter after that explosion, after feeling that.
But you're very close to the area you're in. Has been drawing a lot of fire recently. Why is that? Or
I can only assume. No one's. Ukraine has all kinds of military type facilities that you don't know that are military, and those are all throughout the city.
Okay.
So it could be a storage place. It could be a medical facility. It could be any type of.
Could be communications. You're south of the center. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, you're not in the center.
I'm city center. I
You
would
are?
say that
But south of the city center, right?
just a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm by Ocean Plaza Mall, so like I'm city center.
Yeah, okay. But you've got two types of explosions going on. There's the explosion of their stuff and the explosion of the Ukrainian patriots, right?
Correct. Yeah. So
Because all of these missiles have been knocked out of the air, mostly. I mean, 90-some%, right?
With 90%.
Yeah.
90%.
Yeah.
I looked at the apartment that's behind me that was hit on Thursday. No, this week, I can't remember which day it was. But the entire top floor is completely gutted. And all the windows in that entire building are blown out. And when I say completely gutted, like it's a shell. There's nothing left in the top two floors. And Ukrainian military is saying that they shot down that drone. Something impacted that building.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the missile intercepted the drone so close to the building. It's 19 floors up. I don't know if it was so close that the explosion, the shock wave, blew out all the windows in the building, and then the combination of the missile debris crashed through into the top two floors, gutting it, or if
Patrick, I can actually explain that to you, because the Patriot system is meant to actually down bigger aircraft, such as F-16s, Su-57s, the 35s, and the 29s. It's accurate enough to shoot down these drones. These drones are massive. They're about the size of a Cessna 152. Now, the problem is that they're much smaller than a Cessna 152, obviously, but the missiles don't strike them directly all the time. They usually strike them at an area where they think that the drone is, and then that's where the missile explodes. The missile is not supposed to be a direct fire. It is supposed to be an area where they predict the object is going to be, and then it explodes in that area. Then, if it hits the drone, it is going to concussively break it apart. And most of the drone stays together, but most of it is actually destroyed, where it destroys either the engine or it destroys its navigation system, or it just breaks it apart enough to make it non-usable anymore. Then the drone has to go somewhere. And then, of course, the rocket debris. So that's why you most likely had the drone impact the building. And then the rest of the rocket debris, which most of the rocket destroys itself, you'll have that debris raining down, which is the most dangerous part of it.
Yeah, the debris from the defensive rockets is also dangerous, isn't it?
oh my God,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, because it can set things on fire or hit something or someone. Yeah.
I'd much rather be on fire than be hit by one of those dang pieces of metal.
Okay. Makes sense.
So, are you saying that technically that Patriot missile could go up in the air, doesn't physically touch the drone, explodes in the air, disables the drone, and then the drone with the bomb on it could then land into that apartment and detonate?
Yeah.
Okay. So it can be a little confusing to a lot of people, and also misleading when the Ukrainian government says we successfully downed all 10 drones that came into Kiev. Well, it doesn't mean that those drones still could be landing, just landing disabled and then exploding. So that drones could still have the same explosive device and on it when it lands, instead of it exploding in the air before it lands. Correct?
Correct.
That makes sense. So
Patrick,
yeah.
can I ask you a question? What is
Sure.
the general feeling of the past week? Has it changed from before? How are people feeling in the street and in the shelters?
People are tired. People aren't sleeping. People's anxiety is high. It's different than it ever has been in Kiev. The last 4 weeks in Kiev, I'm not sure if anyone here has ever, unless you're a displaced person from Kharkiv or from the east has experienced this type of repeated attack. Psychologically, it's breaking people down. It's broken me. I'm not the same person I was 4 weeks ago.
So, all right. So it's a repeated thing, and you're not the only one who's feeling this. You're an example of what a lot of people are feeling. And do people talk about it when you go down in the shelters? I sent you a film about the Blitz in London, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, that was mostly from bombs from airplanes. When the Nazis started sending in the rockets at the end of the war, people said that drove them crazy. That's more like what you're facing. What the Londoners faced in World War II at the end of the war, but which was stopped because of the Allied advance. This one, there's no stopping. It's coming from nearby, from the sea, from Belarus or Russia, land-based, and there's no reason for it to stop. There's no invasion taking place there. So that might be lending some, well, rather depressing atmosphere to what's happening, to these events. It's been a lot more in the last week. Has your feeling and the feeling in the city changed substantially just in the last week with these, what is it, 6 nights in a row it was? Not last night. Last night, nothing, right? Patrick?
No, nothing.
Yeah, but it's been 6 nights in a row, right?
I've lost count.
I think so. Yeah, I think so by what I could find and by our conversations. It might be time for some R&R, I would suggest. Yeah.
I mean, to answer your question, people in the subways and shelters, when they're there, no one's really talking. People are trying to get a little bit of rest. They're on their phones trying to find out what's happening. Just because you're in the shelter doesn't mean that you can't hear it. In the subway, when I've been in the subway, I can hear every single rocket that flies directly over my head, and it's loud. It's loud in the subway.
That's important information. I wouldn't have known that if you hadn't said it. I hadn't thought about that you would still hear it, even underground. Yeah. All right. That's all we have for this segment. We've been talking about air raids in Kiev with Patrick Patterson in Kiev. Stay tuned for these messages, and we'll see you after the break. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I want to thank Patrick Patterson for taking us through air raid etiquette in its starkest terms. That was extremely informative. Now I want to move on to another subject, something that's developed in the last week in a particularly dramatic way, which is a situation with Belarus. Now, we talked about this, Tony will remember, that we talked about this a year ago. Maybe, Olgierd, you were with us as well, when we talked about Belarus, Suwałki corridor, how these things were going to be a developing problem, and what would happen if Lukashenko were to be taken out, knocked off, or disappeared, or whatever. Anthony and I were talking on the phone, and I suggested it might be similar to the Godfather movie, where they take over and say, you know, Michael Corleone says, I'm the new boss. Michael Corleone's substitute being Putin. I'm the new boss. Take over the Lukashenko networks and just say, I'm paying you now, instead of that guy. That could be what's happening, because Lukashenko disappeared on Monday, didn't he? And we don't know anything about
Yeah,
him
he hasn't
since
been
then.
seen.
Yeah. He's not been seen, has he?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
No, he hasn't been seen at all.
yeah. And Poland closed the border on Thursday with both Kaliningrad and Belarus. They had closed some of it off. Now it's totally closed to traffic. Now, what are the implications of that first? Practically, and what does it mean in terms of strategy? Closing the borders.
Closing the borders means that there's activity across the border, obviously. But that means that the NATO forces have to post themselves, so there's posturing on both sides. NATO is most likely posturing because of fears of an invasion on that side. Poland's been ringing that bell for many, many months, actually for the past year and a half. And so has the NATO allies. They've taken notice of that along the lines of the Baltic countries, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia, to name the three. Known it's been going to happen. They don't trust Belarus yet. That's one of the reasons why. There's trade routes that go through Belarus. That's been a massive implication to that. That's going to hurt the economy as it's already fragile as it is. And conscripts that Russia had escaped before the conscription, now they can't. They can't run away on all borders. The only other borders that they can pretty much run to are Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, which are not going to give them quarters, and Poland. That's Poland, of course, but then Ukraine. But the wars in Ukraine, and Ukrainians are not going to give them any housing or any quarters. So then you can only think about the other countries. You got the stands, the Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, all those countries that are there. Are they going to help out? They can bypass through Russia. Good luck. So conscripts are going to be stuck in limbo, and they're going to be forced to probably join the military that is going to be made part of if things keep going the way they are.
Olgierd, what's the state of the relationship? How does Lukashenko stay in power exactly? And what can Putin hope to gain from replacing him? Or what will he gain, in your estimate?
As a linguist,
as a professor who, listen, Chomsky's a linguist.
oh, cool. As a linguist, I can tell you some kind of Chomskyan kind of ideas, but on my side. Yeah. No, I think that Russia will not cancel Belarus as it is. Belarus will stay independent country one, because Belarus means one vote in UN on the Russian side.
So independent in what sense? That's a good point, but independent in what sense that...
Independent on a phase, as it was independent during Soviet times, when Belarus and Ukraine also had a separate vote from Soviet Russia.
Okay, that's why I asked you the question. Good answer. Okay. Arthur, you've been down by the border many, many times, and along the border with Belarus as well. So have I. But what has been your observation of the transformation of that border in the last year and a half? Coming up 2 years in September, I suppose.
Well, the first time when actually I went from Warsaw to the border, that was the closest border from Warsaw, Dorohusk. So that's, of course, Ukrainian border crossing. And I just went there to pick up someone. I didn't know who exactly, and help them with transportation, because that's what we were doing at the very beginning of the war. And there was a family of 4 women who needed to go to Biała Podlaska. So once I picked them up, I had to go directly north, right next to Belarusian border.
That's right on the border.
I was driving actually there were signs that you are in the next to border area. So these signs were even over there before. But during that time, we were also facing the immigration problem provided by Lukashenko.
Right.
So there were hundreds of soldiers, policemen that we saw on the way. We were stopped twice. Our documents were checked, even over then. So we are talking...
In Poland, your documents
we are
were
talking
checked.
late February, early March 2022. So even over there, the situation was very fragile. And, well, maybe not fragile, but tensed. So today, once the borders are completely closed, and yes, the situation has been developing during last year and a half, when there were protests on the borders, when particular truck drivers were not let through. We started to have embargo, and then now we closed the borders totally. So it's better not to get there at all right now. We also had some information during last 2 weeks that there were even new immigrant families from Far Eastern countries just leaning on this brand new constructed fence that also appeared there about 1 year during last year as well. So that's a very, very delicate situation. And yes, we are afraid, just as we were from the very beginning of the war. If the main attack on Ukraine came from Belarus, actually, so how about now? The leader Lukashenko, after first few weeks of the war, when it turned out that it's not as successful from Russian point of view, then we saw him during this conference trying to explain Putin in a delicate way that maybe they should start some conversations to make things right. So he was presenting his point of view in a pretty reasonable way, as far as if we only can use this word when it comes to this person. But he also wants his country to develop in a good way. And now, if he's not there, situation's not stabilized at all, well, that's not good news at all.
So what you're telling us, this is very good eyewitness color. I know the same thing that you're saying. I have nothing to add to to your excellent exposition there of what's going on the border. But the fence has gone up in the meantime. There's a border fence. That border is closed within a kilometer or two of the border. You're going to be checked if you go beyond that, unless you live there. If you live there and you go in, they're going to make sure that you do. You're not allowed to pass. And that's been the case for at least since the winter, certainly since the war started.
Yes.
And even before. But now there's a fence, and now there's also, and this is quite a high fence. I mean,
That's a big one.
Yeah, and you know, solid, and beyond that, the crossings. So no transport, and that's a major transport to between the east and the west. Through Belarus. It's one of the major ways.
So what we notice these days, Ukraine, which language and lots of people felt very big connection with Russia before the war, and Ukraine stayed closer to Russia in many aspects, now is transitioning. Ukraine, even last Easter celebration, well, in some areas was celebrated in more European way, so 1 week earlier. So Ukraine is getting closer to NATO, of course, European Union. So how about Belarus? What will be next steps of Belarus? So probably Russia wants to stop it, wants to block it totally.
And destabilize Poland. Because once you're there, Anthony, I'll come back to you. Thanks, Arthur. I'll come back to you, Anthony. Once you destabilize and control, once you control Belarus, you destabilize Poland, ipso facto. But how does that take place, Anthony? This destabilization.
Destabilize Poland?
Yeah. What is the risk to Poland and to the Baltic states?
The closing of the Trafalgar Gap.
The Suwałki Gap, yeah.
Yes, closing that gap is going to be the first and foremost thing that Russia needs to do, because then they'll be able to envelop the 3 Baltic countries. Now, we say that it's easier said than done, because those countries are going to fight with everything they have, and they will. They are one of the best fighters and most heavily trained individuals that I've ever seen and had the privilege to work with. However,
throughout the Baltics, you're saying, sorry, Tony, you're saying all the Baltic states are that well trained? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yes, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. Yeah, at least these guys will fight to the death. They are not to be messed with. They are very well trained in modern Western systems, and they also have a lot of NATO position forces there. But
When you say a lot,
thing that
how
I'm
many?
always talking
When you
about,
say a
and
lot,
everybody's-
is that in the nature of thousands or tens of thousands NATO forces?
thousands.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Now here's the thing: you have to understand that those units that are there, they're only there to stop and hold as long as they can, or as hard as they can, to make the rest of the NATO forces mass near where the action is, and that way it gives them time to get to the east. It's basically a speed bump. We will not gain control of that, and it's flat out honest. But the problem that I see is Article 5. Who in NATO is going to really have the
Okay.
honor that Article
Say
5?
that again, please, because we
Don't
just
see very
lost
many.
that. Start again with that. Article 5.
Article 5. Who is going to stand behind or invoke Article 5? Really stand behind it. That's going to really see who is an actual NATO member. Because there has been a lot of issues in the recent months with a few NATO allies that are massive NATO allies. And I'm not going to name names, Germany and France. And they are really showing their true colors. So that's what I'm saying, where if they're going to really stand up to the word or not. So we'll see if that happens. Hopefully not. But in Poland, of course, they're taking their stance. They're bolstering the military because they see this. They're not wanting to be dependent on their NATO allies because they've been turned their backs to multiple times, World War I and World War II, and then others, even after World War II. So they're not going to sit down and wait. So that's a good thing on Poland's end. However, they're going to be fighting a war from two different fronts. Now, if they have Belarus, that's different. Russia, if they do gain control of that, it's going to give them access to the military. It is going to be able to allow them to maneuver equipment that is there from Russia or Belarus, or that has already been there, to posture it to either threaten or to do first strike. So that's the issue that Poland has.
What if the Russians are preparing now in Belarus to do the thing that everybody's thought about from the beginning, to then be able to hook up with the people in Kaliningrad? Isn't that the reason for closing those borders, to stop that, to be ready in case they do attempt, the Russians, to hook that up, cut off the Baltics, and open up a new front to take away the pressure from Crimea, etc., and perhaps be able to encroach from there?
That would be scenario. That is one of the scenarios. That's why in early February, late January this year, that's why NATO held exercises in the northern regions of Poland, so the northeast regions of Poland near Kaliningrad. It's a show of force. But a show of force is nothing. So we still have Kaliningrad that is heavily militarized. And then we also now have the Belarusia, which may or may not be under Russian control.
Yeah, we can't be sure about that, but we know that Lukashenko is not in the picture since Monday.
No.
Putin very much is. We know that the borders are closed, and for the reasons
well, one thing that you have to take into consideration is that, as opposed to Russia, we have decent information about what is happening on the ground in Belarus.
Yes, go ahead, expand, please.
Because there is a lot of communication between Poland and other countries and what is happening in Belarus.
What are you hearing?
Well, right now I believe Russians are still moving, but they are not taking over in a military sense.
Do they need to if Putin just takes over Lukashenko's network?
Well, Belarusians are kind of pretty well trained historically in the Italian kind of protests. So they will be doing everything Russians want so slowly that it will never be done.
Aha. So specific slowdowns and getting in the way.
Yes, so that they'll be getting in the way. I'm pretty sure of that. So Russians will need to forcibly take over. That will be noticeable from our standpoint. I believe. I'm not sure, but that's what I think.
Right. So what you're hearing suggests that the Russians are not taking over, let's say physically, the country, but they're certainly moving in a lot of equipment. At what point is it a fait accompli and they're just there and they're in charge by proxy, if you see what I mean?
Well, it's always this is difficult to say, and
Yeah.
and again, you can have equipment in one place, but if everybody knows where it is, I don't know. I hope the NATO guys, they have good guns and they know where to point them. One of the two things: the Russian armaments in Belarus, especially the nuclear silos they have built, and the Russian fleet in Kaliningrad.
Yes, I mean, Kaliningrad is what you could call an armed camp, and it, as far as we know, at least has nuclear-capable missiles there. Isn't that right, Tony?
Yeah, they have missiles and they have nuclear-capable submarines there, and they have a battle cruiser that is also nuclear-capable there.
Yeah, so, you know, they're already here. People are worried about them invading Ukraine and coming to Europe. They're already sitting in Europe, armed to the teeth, and we're in a war with them. We are at war, in a sense, with the Russians already. If for no other reason, by virtue of the situation of the war at this point and their location, physical location, where they are in the center of Europe, effectively, in Kaliningrad. So the situation.
But it's
go ahead.
Well,
Please.
I was just going to say, I was just going to interject for OLGIERD's comments. OLGIERD, it's true that the Belarusians are going to be tactically a pest for Russia. That's true, absolutely. And I cannot wait for them to do that. And that's what I hope they do. And that's basically insurgents tactics. I would be doing the same damn thing if something happened here in Poland like that. However, they also have fear from what Lukashenko has, and that's where they're going to probably do a proxy. Now, that's what I would do if I were the Russians, is instill a proxy that is somewhat of a trusted person for the Belarusians, because then if they do it swiftly enough, they can still invoke martial law, of which then the Russian military that's already there can control each strategic city across Belarusia. And that
that's true.
in itself would control.
Yeah, but as I was saying,
problem.
as I was alluding to before in our previous conversation, not on camera, but with Tony last night, was the network of terror that's used and manipulation that's used by, I don't know if it's terror, but certainly manipulation and blackmail and threats by Lukashenko on his own people will be there. And those people will be looking for a paymaster. So the next guy comes in under the control of Russia even more, or it's directly to Putin himself at this point, effectively, and they get paid in the same way, perhaps even more, to stay loyal to that because they've been bought off already. That whole network's bought off, isn't it? I mean, there'll be...
Yes, the network is bought off. It's obvious.
Yeah, but I mean, there'll be some double agents, but basically they're bought off, and that's a large. Do we know what percentage of Belarusians are that are directly tied to getting paid by Lukashenko? It's substantial.
Yes
last time I
no.
remember,
It's massive, but yes and no.
it's like 50% of the
have a clear
people or
picture.
something. Yeah.
No, rather 15 than 50 directly paid.
What did I say? 50?
15.
15.
50.
Yeah. 15, 20% maybe at the outside 20.
Yeah, it's just the one guess.
25%.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they've got a that's what worries me, the ready-made mafia network, just to be taken over. As we know, the Russian system has been called just nothing but a glorified mafia system anyway.
Well, I hope they're going to be infiltrated. I believe there is a similar situation to what Ukraine does with Russia right now. So they're sending in Russian troops into Ukraine or Russian troops to Russia, There is also similar legion made of Belarusians. in
Yeah,
Ukraine.
they've been fighting even in Bakhmut. As the mayor
Yes.
of Rivne, Mr. Tretiak, was telling us on the show. Rivne, of course, is the city northeast of Lviv, closer to the border with Belarus, and in between two vital nuclear power plants that are providing most of the power for Ukraine at the moment. So he
Aren't
was
you
saying,
guys worried about the stabilization of situation in Poland at the moment?
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
Aren't you guys worried about the
Yes.
stabilization of situation in Poland?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what happens in Belarus, because that puts the Russians in control right up on the border in two places, Kaliningrad and Belarus, and effectively in control of Belarus. So, yeah, this is a big problem. And as Anthony says, Article 5 invokes the NATO countries to come to the aid of countries that would be under fire, NATO countries that would be under fire, and that would include the Baltic countries. But it's easy for them to get cut off. Of course, there is Finland then,
come
and
on.
Finland
Do
can
not
start to
forget
do
about
action.
Finland.
What?
Finland?
Yeah.
Finland hangs as a Damocles
Yes. Yes.
sword above Leningrad, so it's not that,
Well, that's why you're on the show, Olgierd,
Yeah,
to
but-
say
but
things like that.
here's-
It's absolutely
but
right.
Finland can't do a lot yet. There's a reason for that, because it takes them hours to mobilize. The Trafalgar Gap can be closed within a few hours if Russia does it right, which
Suwałki
haven't
Gap
done
can be
anything
closed in a few hours. Suwałki, yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So Suwałki Gap, sorry,
It's-
Trafalgar Gap. So Suwałki Gap.
Yeah.
It is.
Trafalgar
and
Gap
the-
would be
the thing
down
with
by the
that-
Gibraltar. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry. I always get those two mixed up. Dang it. And the problem with that is that from Finland to get down to here is they still have to go through Kaliningrad.
No.
They
I
have
was
to go
thinking
through the
about
invaded
Finland.
countries of Lithuania, Estonia.
I was thinking about another thing: Finland and Petersburg,
Yes.
and Leningrad.
And they also,
no.
they also
absolutely,
have a
'cause
long
they're only
border
60
with
kilometers
Russia.
away from it.
They have a long border with
so
Russia.
It's a situation that is
Yeah.
in a Polish proverb.
Yeah.
There's this Polish proverb: "Złapał kozak Tatarzyna, a Tatarzyn za łeb trzyma." So Tatar guy caught a Cossack, but the Cossack is still holding his head.
I love that. We've got to stop with that. That's all Arthur was just about to say. Say it quick, Arthur.
That's actually
No,
good.
just as far as we are talking what Russia can or cannot do, how we would compare it to latest Blinken's statement that Russia's army is second most powerful army in Ukraine instead of second most powerful country in the world. So not sure if Finland's border, the Tatarzyn case at the moment is so worrying.
Good. We got to stop. I want to thank everybody for being on the show. Thank you for watching. We're in overtime right now, and we don't have overtime. See you next time.